So I was walking back through the tunnel and Tony Robbins was on his phone and he looked up from his phone and he said, "Hey man, how's it going?" And I go, "I never do this. I know everybody says that, but I actually don't. I'm a huge fan. I read your book." And he said, "Have you ever been to my seminar?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, I only do 3 domestically a year, but I'd love it if you come as my personal VIP guest next month."
Wow.
I said, "Get out of here." And he's like, no, here, take my secretary's information. So his secretary set it all up. Next month, I was in San Jose beside the stage, high-fiving Tony.
Let's go.
Little did my guest know when he was a kid growing up in Boston that the traumas he suffered as a teenager and young adult would one day lead him to uncover his passion for breathwork. Not just doing it, but teaching it with his special gift for making breathwork accessible to the masses. Before that, he dabbled in acting and screenplay writing and worked as a much sought after celebrity trainer and sober coach in Hollywood. Then one day, he unexpectedly found himself in a breathwork class and had a massive and magical transformation the very first time he learned to breathe. Welcome back to another episode of This Magic Life. I'm your host, Andrea Koppel. My guest today is Jon Paul Crimi, an unconventional breathwork teacher. I couldn't even say it to say the very least, who infuses his extremely popular and expletive-infused teaching style with a distinctly non-New Agey vibe. You won't find any tie-dye or flowy yoga pants on Jon Paul. Jon Paul began teaching his breathwork technique 12 years ago in sold-out classes all over LA, and is today an immensely popular teacher who leads live and online classes and breathwork teacher trainings, as well as customized workshops for individuals, private corporations, and organizations all over the world. From CEOs to Olympians, Oscar, Emmy, and Grammy Award winners, Jon Paul has witnessed his students visibly transform like him after just one session. Jon Paul, welcome to This Magic Life.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. And I also want to add that I can attest from personal experience to the power of what you teach, which we are going to be digging into very shortly. In fact, the way that you came on my radar screen was also serendipitous. I was at a conference in Dallas and happened to mention to a woman I met there that I wanted to get into breath work. And she said, "Well, you must have heard of Jon Paul Crimi." And I was like, "Well, I hadn't." But I looked you up immediately and signed up for one of your online classes and then did a personal one-on-one. And I mean it when I say that first online class, which was about getting rid of sadness and trauma and anger, had me absolutely sobbing. And after that, when you had us kind of lie there just chilling, I mean, the energy was just buzzing through my body.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of out there looking for the quick fix in life these days, right? Everybody wants it fast. Nobody wants to wait. We're in a 2-minute TikTok society now where like everybody wants results right away. And not many things actually do that in life. Not many things can deliver results in the first session. And this actually does. It does deliver results in the first session. And it's life-changing but you have to show up and do it. And you have to you don't have to believe it's going to work. In fact, if you're skeptical or doubtful, or you're like, this is so stupid, I can't believe my wife's making me do this thing, right? Like, I love those people, because those are the ones that have kind of the biggest openings sometimes. Because if you just do it, if you just do this breath work the way I show you, something is going to happen. Something very powerful is going to happen. And what's incredible about it is it's different for everybody, and it's different every time you do it, right? So you can do a class with me, say online on a Sunday on Zoom, and then you can do that class replay that I have, which is the same exact class that you just did, but now you have something different happen the next time you do it the next day. So breathwork is different every single time. It could be the same exact class, but you're going to have a different result because you're not the same person that did it the day before, because it's clearing things out of your nervous system. And if I was someone out there listening to this, watching this, and heard that, I'd be like, bullshit. That would be my response.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, great. You're skeptical. You're cynical like me. Fantastic. Come and do it and see for yourself is what I say. Like, don't take my word for it. Come and do it and tell me I'm wrong afterwards, because it just doesn't happen. But I'm one of those people that, like, I don't believe in anything until I go and experience it for myself first.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm going to want to dig into the methodology that you've developed a little bit later in this interview. But first, Jon Paul, the fact is sometimes the things that precede the magic and serendipities that happen to us, whether it's in our personal lives or professional lives, are as joyful as falling in love.
Mm-hmm.
And at other times, they're as painful as a bad breakup or worse. And I think it's fair to say that you've experienced the equivalent of the bad breakup over and over and over again, especially back when you were a teenager, if not even sooner in your life. Could you take us back to some of those bigger moments to help our audience appreciate some of the traumas that you were holding on to as a 20-something that were buried deep in your psyche and in your physical body, that had you feeling unsafe in the world? And I think one of them happened back when you were just 16.
Yeah, I was jumped walking out of high school by 4 guys in their 20s when I was like 15, 16 years old. And, I get tapped on the shoulder, and I turned and got punched, and then my head hit the pavement. So got knocked unconscious, and then these guys kicked me while I was unconscious. And so I was in the hospital for a few days. And looking back on that now, I think I had a traumatic brain injury, but it was undiagnosed at the time. I ended up working with someone in sobriety who had a traumatic brain injury and spent some time in one of these traumatic brain injury treatment centers. And I thought, holy shit, that's what I had when I was 15, 16 years old, and no one diagnosed it, right? Like, I had all the symptoms of it. So that happened to me. And then I was stabbed in the head when I was 19 years old. You can kind of see it a little bit. It raised the skin up, and the doctor said, a couple inches lower, it would have stabbed you in the eye and probably killed you. And that was drinking in Boston, outside at a party. And so these things happened to me, and I got in a lot of fights in high school, and just a lot. And so I think it's Freud that says you either grow up in a hostile environment or a friendly environment. Like, that's the most important decision you're ever going to make in your life. That's what Freud says. But I think the decision was made for me when I was young by all those things that happened. Like, when you're stabbed and you're jumped and all these things happen, you're in a hostile environment. That's not a decision that you're making. You literally are in a hostile environment. There are people who grow up in war zones. They're in a hostile environment. The decision is made for them. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but breathwork was able, through getting sober and helping from people helping me and me helping other people, and then finding breathwork, I think I changed that environment. I think I changed that to a friendly environment. And so it can change.
Which is exactly the right message that we want to be sharing with our audience today. But I just want to go back. I don't want to re-traumatize you by having to go into more detail, but I feel that that incident that happened when you were 19, Jon Paul, was not just, you weren't just stabbed, you were stabbed once, and then you went looking for help and you were knocking on doors saying, and you were bleeding heavily and nobody
Yeah,
came to
nobody would
help
open the
you.
door. Nobody would help me. It was really scary. I was just, knocking on people's doors in the middle of the night. Help me, please. No one would open the door, which I understand now. But this was in an upper middle class neighborhood in suburban Boston. And it wasn't like a dangerous city. It wasn't in the city. And so, but no one would open the door. And I kind of get that for safety reasons. But finally, one person, I just said, "Can you please just call an ambulance? I'm bleeding to death out here." And I didn't know if they did or not. I just walked out to the street. They said they called an ambulance. They said they called the police. And I just walked out to the street and waited. And I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. So yeah, I thought I was dying. I was dying essentially. And I woke up in the ambulance and they were, pumping new blood into me. And because I had lost half the blood in my body. And so I remember, being in the hospital, the plastic surgeon stitching my head, and they didn't want to give me any anesthesia or anything to numb it because they were afraid I was on some drugs or something, which I wasn't, but I was hungover by this point. And so I felt every single stitch in my head,
Oy.
41 stitches. And I felt every single one like Rambo or something like that. And, him stitching my head and saying, "Don't worry, kid, your hair will cover it," which it's hilarious to me now that I have no hair. But
and you have no hair because you have alopecia, not because you decided you were balding and you wanted to shave your head.
right. Yeah, I lost my hair in my 20s to alopecia. So I have no hair. And then, and the next night, here's the alcoholism, which I didn't know at the time. The next night, my whole head was bandaged up and I had all these stitches in my head. And the next night I was out at a party drinking. And someone was like, "Didn't you get stabbed last night?" And I said, "Yeah, what's happening with you?" Like just drinking on painkillers, not wanting to deal with, the reality of my life and trying to numb out. So I spent a lot of years trying to numb away, the fact that I didn't feel safe, the fact that I had lost some close friends to me that had died, not understanding or knowing how to deal with grief. And all the things that come with that. So yeah, it was a really rough childhood upbringing. And some of it was my own making. A lot of it was my own making. I came from a decent house, but I got involved with the wrong people and the wrong situations and put myself in the wrong situations a lot of times.
And you told me just before we started this interview that you actually had such a hard time in high school with bullies that you ended up dropping out.
Yeah. Well, this is, Boston in the 90s. We didn't call them bullies. We just called it school. So,
Okay.
I was getting in fights every day. I didn't want to fight. I just kids would start fights with me, other kids. And so I'd get jumped sometimes. I get in fights. And so finally I said, I'm not for me. And so I quit school, I think 16 years old, and started working. And then I did the GED right away. It's supposed to be 2 nights, 4 hours each night. I did it in 3 hours the first night. And then I did the military test, the ASVAB for the military, and was considering going into the Air Force. And I scored really high on that. So, they accepted me. I was going to go in the Air Force. And then I got a DUI. And they were like, "No, we're not going to take you in the Air Force. You can join the Marines or whatever it was." And I said, "Well, that's not for me." So I was smart, but I just would get myself into situations,
You
bad
had
situations.
addictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you don't know how to deal with feelings and traumas, you have to find a way. And so for people out there that are drinking and using, it's like, it's the coping mechanism. It saves your life. Like it literally saves your life because, I was suicidal a lot of the time. And so the drugs and the alcohol would keep me from killing myself. And so drugs and alcohol can save your life until it stops working, and then you have to find another way.
So, when and why did you decide to leave Boston and head to LA?
So I was 23 years old. I wanted to get out of Boston. I was trying to get out of Boston at an earlier age. I just didn't know how. I mean, I tried to get out with the military. I didn't. And then I went on a trip with a friend to Hawaii, and it was kind of the first real place I'd ever gone. And I came back and I said, what am I doing? Like life, the world is an amazing place, and I need to, see what's out there. And I always wanted to be an actor. I did some theater when I was young. So I had this dream to go to California and become an actor. And a friend of mine said, I'll go with you. And so the two of us drove cross country when I was 23, and we moved into Venice, California. And I put myself in a method acting program. I got a scholarship to a method acting program, which was amazing. And I studied acting for the next 3 years. And in the process of studying acting, that's when my hair started to fall out. And it's pretty clear now why, because I was processing the traumas that had happened to me up on a stage in front of a room full of people. Not the right environment to process trauma and all that kind of stuff. I remember there was one exercise one night where the teacher was like, pretend, told my partner this, pretend you're stabbing him. And I was like, I got to stop. And she's like, what do you mean you're going to stop? And I said, I've been stabbed. It's like, I don't want to pretend like I'm being stabbed here, And so the stress of the whole thing, because it was really stressful, this environment, this method acting program, I started to get patches on my head and on my arms. It's called alopecia areata. It's sudden hair loss. And they think it's brought on by trauma or stress, right? And so I believe it was trying to process those traumas, those emotions in the wrong environment. But I plowed through. I didn't want to stop the acting school. I didn't want to quit. So I kept going, and they put me on medications. They put me on prednisone, which is a catabolic steroid, right? Bodybuilders and athletes take anabolic steroid to help build muscle and to help you recover faster. This is catabolic. It breaks down muscle tissue. It does the opposite. And I should note that at the time I was actually working in Gold's Gym, Venice, California, the mecca of bodybuilding. And so I was a personal trainer there. So I'm like a personal trainer who's taking catabolic steroids. Everyone around me is taking anabolic, and I'm getting fat and bloated, and I'm training people in this environment where you're supposed to be really buff. And so I would get these cortisone shots in my eyebrows and in my head to try and keep my hair, right? And it would be really painful. I'd get like 40 in each eyebrow and a bunch in my head. Yeah, I'd get like 200 shots in a session every 3 weeks. And so I started taking Vicodin to deal with that pain of that session. And then I just started eating the Vicodin all the time, because Vicodin is not only a physical pain blocker, it's an emotional pain blocker. So I started eating Vicodin every day. And I could work on it. I would be training clients and eating Vicodin. And I think I got up to like 30, 40 Vicodin a day, which is crazy. And then I would go home and drink at night and drink myself into oblivion on pain meds, which is really dangerous.
No kidding. So when did you decide and actually find the strength to get sober, Jon Paul?
Yeah. So my sobriety date is March 5th, 2000. I had tried to quit drinking a year before that, and I would get like 20 days and then I would drink, and 30 days and I would drink. And so I was trying to do it on my own. And I had a therapist who had suggested, hey, maybe you should go check out Alcoholics Anonymous recovery. And I was like, no, I don't need that. I'm this and I'm that and whatever. And then another one of my close friends from Boston had passed away, and I got the phone call, and I used this as an excuse to go on a bender for like 3 days drinking. And when I came out of that, I just was devastated, and, it was a mess. I broke the door of the house, and the phone was missing. And I had a roommate who was an exotic dancer, stripper. And she was like, you're a mess. And I was like, you're right. I don't know what to do. And she's like, go to AA. And I was like, okay, and so I went to AA, and like, my therapist had suggested it before, but my stripper roommate carried more weight at the time for some reason than my therapist.
Well,
So
she really knew you. She was probably a friend.
she's an amazing human. And so I just say that, it's just like, you don't know where you're going to hear the message, right? And
Yes.
I was also ready. I was ready because I had tried to get sober on my own and I couldn't do it. So um I went to these 12-step meetings and I got help. And we're not supposed to talk about that too much because, it's anonymous. So we'll just say, like, if there's anyone out there, you know, 12-step works, recovery works, AA works. I've seen it work. And I bump into people all the time and they're like, "Oh, I tried that. It didn't work for me." And I go, "Okay. Did you get a sponsor? Did you work all 12 steps, including turning around and helping somebody else?" And they're like, "No, I didn't do that." I go, "Well, then you didn't really do it."
Mm.
So you can't say it didn't work for you because you didn't really do it. And so I'm pretty
Yeah,
clear about that. It works.
which is amazing. And I'm actually curious, as you said, you mentioned the 12th step of did you go out there and help anyone? Because you actually flip that out, or maybe worked your own magic and turned it into a line of coaching and became a sober coach. I don't know. Is that the chronology of how that happened?
Yeah, sober companioning, sober coaching is what it's called. It wasn't my invention. It's been around for a while. Like, people have been going on tour with, rock stars for many, many years now. And when they come out of rehab and they need to go back on tour, a sober companion would go with them, and movie stars. So I actually really started helping a lot of people, a lot of guys get sober. And I got really good at it. And because I just didn't take any bullshit, and I said, "Here's how we're going to do it." And I kind of approached it pretty hardcore. And then someone in the sober companion, sober coaching world, a personal training client of mine, sort of dragged me into the business and said, "You'd be really good at this." And I said, "Oh, I don't know if that's for me." And he had me start, working with people. And, lo and behold, I was really good with it. I had a lot of experience already helping celebrities because I was training a lot of celebrities at the time. So for me to be like, "Shut up, give me 50 push-ups," to like not put up with the celebrity. So people are just enamored by celebrities and they let them manipulate them. And I'm not that guy. So that's one of the key, attributes to being a good sober coach, a good sober companion, is like, no, you don't put up with the celebrity bullshit. Um, so I got pulled into that world, and the next thing I knew, I was, flying on private planes and going to movie sets and going on tour with bands, and it was pretty wild, and not as fun and as glamorous as I thought it would be, and as people think it is. People
Why?
think it's good. Well, because the person is not, they're at their bottom of their, they've hit rock bottom and they don't really want to be sober a lot of the times. And so, for example, if you're on tour with a rock star, like, the rest of the band hates them at this point, right? And they hate that now we've got this guy on the bus with us who we don't know, who's in our world, and he's trying to keep the asshole singer, sober so that we can do the show, so we can do what we love to do because we just want to play music and have fun. But this guy can't keep it together because he's got a problem, right? So, and the singer, doesn't want to be sober most of the time. It's a hard life. And I got to, of course I had rock star fantasies growing up as a kid, but when you're on the tour bus and you go to a different city every single night, you fall asleep on the bus and then you wake up and you're in another city or another country if you're touring Europe. It's very disorienting, and you don't know where you are, and the relationships, people you meet, you're never going to see them again, ever again. So it's very surface, and the people you're on the bus with, everybody's hating each other by this point. So you're missing that human connection, and it's just a hard life. It's a really, really hard life. I don't envy rock stars. I have a lot of friends who are, big time musicians, and they go on tour, and it's a hard life.
So, how did you go from being a sober coach and a body shaper as well,
Personal trainer.
to personal trainer, to taking your first breathwork class?
Well, so I was hanging out with Matthew Perry. I was his personal trainer, and I helped him in some other ways. He was a very close friend of mine. And we were following the Los Angeles Kings hockey team around one season. And it just happened to be the season they went on a run and won the Stanley Cup. And we got to know the players, and we were actually flying around. It was this incredible thing. We were going to the playoff games. And
You were groupies.
yeah, we were groupies for the hockey. I grew up watching hockey, and Matthew loves hockey or loved hockey. And so the Kings are about to win the Stanley Cup, and we're in this VIP room in between periods underneath this Los Angeles Staples Center. And there's every celebrity in Los Angeles is in there. Vince Vaughn is in there, and Will Ferrell and Zac Efron, and Matthew and I are in there, and it was fun. And in walks Tony Robbins, and I go, "Holy shit, it's Tony Robbins!" And Matthew goes, "Really? We followed the Kings around all season. They're about to win the Stanley Cup in a few minutes. And every celebrity in Los Angeles is in here, and you're excited about a gigantic man right now?" And I said, "Oh, he's amazing. He's helped all these people, and I've read his book in high school, and I used to have cassette tapes." And he said, "Well, go tell him." And I said, "I don't want to bug him like everybody bugs you. I don't want to be that guy." And he's like, "All right, whatever." So I was walking back through the tunnel, and Tony Robbins was on his phone, and he looked up from his phone, and he said, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And I go, "I never do this. I know everybody says that, but I actually don't. I'm a huge fan. I read your book and all that." And he said, "Have you ever been to my seminar?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, I only do 3 domestically a year, but I'd love it if you'd come as my personal VIP guest next month."
Wow.
I said, "Get out of here." And he's like, no, here, take my secretary's information. So his secretary set it all up. And next month, I was in San Jose beside the stage, high-fiving Tony. And it was a massive opening for me. And I should preface it with, I was screenwriting for a good while before this, while all of this was going on. And I had a screenwriting deal, had just fallen apart right before this. And I was devastated and heartbroken and sort of, I'm like, okay, I have to go back to work as a personal trainer and a sober companion and, do these things I don't really want to do with my life. And then I went to Tony's event, and I had a big awakening, a big opening there that I said, you know what? I'm done with all the Hollywood shit, and I'm just going to help people. That's what I'm good at. That's what makes me feel good about myself. And at the end of my life, my life will have been worthwhile. Maybe I won't be rich. Maybe I won't be famous and successful, but I will have helped people on this planet, and my life will have meant something. And I had this big opening there. And when I came back, that's when I found breathwork. When I came back from that event, a couple people who didn't know each other said, "You need to go do breathwork." And I said, "What the fuck is breathwork?" You know what I mean? Like, I already know how to breathe. Like, I'm going to pay someone to show me how to breathe. And I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But I'm smart enough to know that if 2 people who don't know each other tell me the same thing, I need to investigate.
Oh, who were so wait, you had 2 people back to back tell you to do it?
Yeah, 2 people, 2 friends of mine who don't know each other said, "You need to go do this breathwork thing." So I said, okay. So I went to a studio. I had to Google it and find it. And there was hardly anything out there. And I just went to the studio and I did this breathwork thing. And it was, when I walked in, it was as awful as I thought it was going to be. It was, crystals and oils and all this like new agey woo-woo bullshit. And I said, "Oh my God, what is this fresh hell that I've walked into?" And because I'm not like that. I'm from Boston, like I don't,
Yeah.
Your life
as
isn't
I
a
said,
mess
you're not
because
into the yoga pants and the
Yes.
tie-dye.
Stop blaming your life being a mess on Mercury in retrograde. You made it a mess. Like, fix it yourself. You made it that way. Don't blame it on the moon, right? So, but I laid down and I did the breathing the way that this teacher had showed us, and I had this big experience. I cracked open in a way that I cried in a way that I'd never experienced before, and I felt lighter and different, and it was incredible and it was undeniable. And so after that experience, I started doing it on my own, and I was doing it every day, and I felt amazing every day. And clients of mine said to me, like, what are you medicated all of a sudden? What's going on? You're so much like more present and happier. And like, And I just said, I'm doing this weird breathing thing. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed about it because it was so weird and new agey and woo woo. And then at some point I said, why doesn't everyone know about this? This is so incredible, right? And I realized that that's why, because it had been kept in these sort of small new age circles. And if someone did it that was like East Coast and edgy and funny and changed the language around it, maybe Tony Robbins kind of style of motivation, that they would have hundreds of people in the room, if not thousands, doing this breath work. And I was right. It took a while to get there because it took a while to convince people of what it was, right? I was trying to get my friends to come to my early classes and they go, dude, I'm not coming to your breathing classes. And then, of course, the classes built up and I was in Los Angeles Magazine and on Good Morning America and the classes were sold out. And then one of the articles had a girl was in my class was a supermodel and there was all these supermodels that were coming to my class. I don't know why. They were friends with each other and they told each other about it. But that got out, word got out that my classes had supermodels in it. So then everyone wanted to come to the class, right? And my friends who I tried to convince to come were like, oh, dude, I need to get into your class. And I said, oh, you wouldn't come when I was begging you when it was empty. But now that there's supermodels in there and it's sold out, you want to take a space up in the class. I see. Okay. So it was a wild ride. It took a while, but, it builds over time. I train people on how to teach breath work. And I always tell my students is kind of the beginning is the hardest part, getting started. But once you get a few people in there and they have big experiences, they tell people and they tell people, and it's humanly viral in an incredible way, because when you can crack somebody open in one session and they can feel amazing. And I've heard people say like, oh my God, I've struggled with this thing my whole life. And that one session just changed it for me.
So what is it, Jon Paul? What is it about breathing that is so powerful in releasing trauma?
Well, so when animals have a way of releasing trauma, right? If a rabbit gets chased by a fox or something like that and it gets away, it will shake to release the trauma of almost just getting killed by the fox. So I believe that this is our mechanism by which to do that. Now, this breathing pattern that I do it in is not a natural breathing pattern per se. Our natural breathing is through the nose, down into the diaphragm. And you'll hear that now, like you should never be breathing through your mouth. And it's correct. You shouldn't be breathing through your mouth when you're sleeping at night, right? My wife mouth tapes now and she gets much deeper sleep and it's incredible. So you should be breathing through your nose. That's our natural way of breathing. So this method that I teach, is a mouth breathing technique. And I always tell people like, look, this is not the way you're breathing all the time, but to clear out your stress, your anxiety, your grief, your generational trauma, totally worth it. 30 minutes of this technique, of this mouth breathing technique to clear out all the shit from your life is totally worth it. So I always try to make that clear because it's not our natural way of breathing, because people will say, oh, I've been breathing my whole life, and that's why I think a lot of people are surprised, because I've been breathing my whole life. How is coming to your class and laying down and breathing going to clear out all my trauma and my stuff? Well, we're going to do a technique that I show you, kind of like a workout, laying on the floor, laying flat. And I'm going to show you this technique and we're going to do it for 30 minutes. And then you're going to have a release. You're going to have an opening. You're going to have an experience of some kind. And so that really worked for me because I tried to meditate for years, and seated meditation is actually a really advanced practice, and it's really hard, especially for people like me that have a loud head. But I understood like, oh, this is like a workout. Like I'm going to lay there and breathe this way for 30 minutes, like a workout, because I was a trainer. And then my head's going to shut off, and then I'm going to clear all this stuff out of my nervous system and feel amazing afterwards. That I can wrap my brain around. That I can do.
For those in our audience, Jon Paul, who may not be aware of the fact that they have traumas stored in their body because they come in all shapes and sizes, what are the indicators about the fact that we have traumas, that we have experienced them? Because most of us, fortunately, have never been stabbed. Many of us may never have been beaten up, but there are other traumas that we have, whether it's maybe not growing up in a nurturing family, or there are other ways that we can have these strong emotions stored in
Well,
our body.
some of your traumas aren't even your traumas. So science has proven that trauma is passed on through the DNA, right? So science, they've proven that mothers that were pregnant at 9/11, that the children are born with higher cortisol levels, and that, grandchildren and great grandchildren of Holocaust survivors have more anxiety, depression, all these kind of things. They did this study on mice where they sprayed cherry blossom spray and then electrocuted the mice. And then the next generation of mice, they would just spray the cherry blossom spray and they would have a reaction, right? But they never got electrocuted. And that lasted up to 15 generations.
Wow.
Yeah. So I say, science has proven that trauma is passed on. Some of your stuff isn't even your stuff. It's your parents' stuff. Maybe your mother was pregnant with you and something happened to her or previous or something like that. So there's a lot of people that have anxiety, depression, all these kind of trauma symptoms that didn't have any trauma. My childhood was fine. I don't know why I'm the way I am. So there's that, right? And so, it doesn't really matter where it came from. What matters is how you deal with it. And so when you come and you do this thing, you can feel it clearing out. And there are some things that some experiences that I had in my own breath work that I had forgotten about. Traumas, things that happened to me when I was a kid, breaking my arm and different things. And so I could actually feel like the breath work was like clearing it out of my body in this incredible way and healing my body in this incredible way. So you may not even know where it comes from, and that's okay. But what are you going to do about it?
And it doesn't have to be a trauma. It doesn't have to be that you attend one of your classes or get into breath work to clear traumas. I mean, some people, it may be releasing anxiety, which is keeping them from being able to concentrate or, settle themselves in order to be able to focus and perform, whether it's in school or on the job.
Totally. I say this as a joke, but it's true. One of the indicators for me was like overreacting. If people tell you all the time you're overreacting. If more than 2 or 3 people say that, you probably are. And overreaction is built up stuff, right? So something happens, you're in line at Starbucks and some jerk doesn't know what he wants to order after you've been standing in line for 25 minutes. You're like, what are you doing? We've been standing in line for 25 minutes. Starbucks is the same all over the world, you asshole. Get out of line. Like, you're overreacting in situations. You're not reacting appropriately for what the situation calls. Now, sometimes anger is an appropriate emotion. It doesn't mean I never get angry now. Sometimes I get angry for the situation, but it's an appropriate amount of anger for the situation.
Yeah, you're not like busting the person's face in.
Yeah, if you're overreacting to what the situation is, that's a good indicator that you've got a lot of stuff built up in your nervous system that needs to be cleared out.
Break down what your style is, Jon Paul, and how you settled on it and why you think so many people relate to it.
Great. So when I first went to breath work, the teacher played a certain kind of music, which I didn't like or identify with. It was, I call hippie music, right? And then, sort of drumming in the background or whatever. And then they were really quiet. They barely said anything in class. And then afterwards, like nothing was said. And so that's not the class that I wanted to take. The class I wanted to take was someone pushing me, because breath work is a little uncomfortable at first. It's hard. You're breathing in this unnatural way. So you have to kind of force yourself to keep doing it. So as a former personal trainer, like, I wanted a personal trainer standing there going, come on, if you've done harder shit in your life than lay on the floor and breathe. It's not that hard. Come on, let's go. And so that's what I say in my class. I'm coaching people through the difficult parts where they want to quit, where they want to give up, and saying, like, I know you want to quit now. I know you want to stop and give up, but there's something on the other side of this for you if you keep going, if you're willing to push through your discomfort, right? So I say all this shit during the class. In addition, I'm playing music that I think is motivating. I'm playing music with energy. I'm playing great music from, Led Zeppelin to Fleetwood Mac to like all this kind of cool shit that like I love. And then I say the emotional stuff, to help crack people open. And oftentimes in my class, I get pretty emotional myself, right? Because what comes from the heart goes to the heart. And so I allow myself to get vulnerable, and I want to be moved. Like I want to be moved when I'm teaching. So I don't want to just teach. I want to feel it too. So I get pretty emotional in my classes, and that gives other people who are breathing the permission to get emotional as well. So that's what I think sets me apart from 99.9% of the other breathwork teachers out there. Like, people aren't able to allow themselves to be that vulnerable and still be able to teach at the same time, right? And then I've added some pieces in there, like a yell at the end, a scream at the end, which is really good, because when in life do we get to yell? When in life do we give ourselves permission to let out a massive yell at the end, which feels really good, and if it's in the right environment? And then I do some heart moments where I pull in moments of gratitude, moments of love at the end, this beautiful heart opening thing that I do. And it's an anchoring technique, because I want you to leave grounded in gratitude and love, not like, holy shit, what was that? I want you to be like, oh, what really matters is this in my life. And that's what I need to focus on. That's what I need to create more of in my life. So it's a whole process that I've built around this breathing technique that is just a really powerful guided session. And it's not for everybody. I'm not for everybody. I can't be authentic and true to myself and who I really am and have everybody love me, right? So some people come and love it, and other people might not, and that's okay. And I swear a lot. When I start to get in the moment and I'm really doing my thing, I tend to swear. It's just, I guess,
Yeah,
in
me
my
too.
core. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just who I am. And so, I've had people online in the chat be like, oh, you're talking too much, you're swearing too much. And I'm like, fucking leave. Like, I'm not for you. Go away, find another breathwork teacher. I'm not for you. That's okay. But the people who are going to identify with that, who are going to relate to that, connect to that, are going to find me. And the people who don't are going to leave or not find me. And that's okay. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. What do you think is the takeaway lesson or lessons, Jon Paul, from your unique career journey
Mhm.
and the way that you have landed on what I think you would agree is your soul's purpose?
I think you have to be willing to try things you wouldn't normally try. You have to be willing to move out of your comfort zone, and you have to show up for yourself. Contrary action is something I talk about a lot. Like, doing the things you don't feel like doing the things you don't necessarily want to do at the time. That's how you change your life. Whether that's going to the gym or going to recovery, stepping into recovery, or going to breath work, there's a lot of things. If I do what I feel like doing, nothing in my life changes. But if I do the things that I don't necessarily feel like doing in that moment, that I know are good for me, that I know are beneficial for me, that's when my life starts to change. And if I can have an open mind and try different things that might be beneficial for me, then my life will change. But
I
if I
love
just keep
that.
doing the same thing over and over, nothing changes.
I love that because I'm thinking about your encounter with Tony Robbins and how you were not that guy. You were not the guy who would go up to a celebrity and fanboy, right? But the universe put him in your path and you did something that you didn't usually do. If you hadn't said something to him and connected with him, he certainly wasn't going to give you a free ticket to
Yeah.
his next event. And I'm also thinking about when you were at his event in the front row, something else that happened to you.
Yeah, I was never going to have kids. That was sort of my plan, to not have children. And we were doing these moments similar to what I do in my class, the heart moments. Tony calls it something else. I think it's the Dickens process. And he had us go into a future moment. And in that future moment, I saw two children. I saw a girl and a little boy. And I was just overwhelmed. And I thought, okay, maybe I want to have children. Like, I think I want to have children. Like, maybe if I'm not going to do this Hollywood thing, maybe that's my purpose. And so I came back from this event and I told my wife, like, I was quiet for 2 days, which has never happened before in history. Uh, and my amazing wife got to actually speak for the first time, I think, in our relationship. And so, we were going on these walks, and I said, hey, I think I want to have kids. And she's like, what happened to Tony Robbins? And I said, I don't know. I saw this vision and I saw these 2 children, and I don't think I want to miss out on this experience. And we ended up having children, and I have a daughter and a son, and they look just like the vision. And somewhere in that vision, somewhere in one of my first breathworks, my own personal first breathworks, I saw myself on the stage doing these moments, guiding people through these moments. And I was like, why would I be doing that? It was very weird. It didn't make sense, but I don't know what it was. 2 years later, I was on a stage guiding people through the moments after breathwork. And I remembered the vision from the breathwork session. And I thought, oh my God, there it is. Right. And so sometimes some things will come into you and during breathwork that don't make sense. And then they make sense later. It's really powerful in that way. It's just an incredible guiding force to go like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm stuck. I don't know where I am in my life. I don't know what to do with my life. And oftentimes we have these, I like to say there's 2 lawyers on either side arguing the case, right? So women, used to come to me private sessions and be like, I go, okay, what's the problem? And they go, well, there's this guy. And I go, okay, give me 2 minutes of the breakdown. I already know, right? And they go, well, he's great and he does this, but he doesn't do this. And they're arguing the case of the relationship for the guy. And I go, well, let's just set the intention in breathwork to get clarity on if it's right for you or not. And they always sit up and they're like, yeah, I got to end this relationship. Because if you're arguing in your head, it's not right? But your heart has that clear answer. So what breathwork does is it turns off your head. It's an incredible thing called transient hypofrontality. It turns off that overthinking analytical part of your brain, the ego, where the critic lives, where, that tells you you're not enough and overthinks everything. And it tunes into your heart, which gives you the clear answer of what your heart wants for you. So they're like, yeah, he's not the right person for me. But what will happen is, not always, a couple days later, they'll start to go into fear. They'll start to live in fear again. And they'll go, well, I don't want to get back out there on the dating apps. And I don't want, he's not that bad. And he has these qualities. So they start to make the case again because they're living out of fear. They're living out of fear that they're going to be alone or all these things. And so, breath work, if they laid down and did breath work again, the fear would go away and they would be in their heart and in their faith again, that they're fine if they're alone. Like, I don't need somebody else to complete me. I like to say that Jerry Maguire is the biggest lie that was ever sold to us, that you complete me. Like, you don't need somebody else to complete you. You complete yourself. And if you're not completing yourself right now, then there's work to be done.
100%. 100%. So, Jon Paul, I have 2 final questions that I try to ask all my guests. The first one is, what can our audience do right now to become more magical, to attract more serendipity in their lives?
I would say show up for yourself in a way that you've never shown up for yourself before. Find some different techniques and tools and different things that you haven't done. Get out of your comfort zone. Go out there and try everything, which is what I did. I said, okay, this is stupid. Let me go try it. So go out there, try breath work with me or somebody else. Try meditating, try doing all these different things and then see what happens. Because sometimes it's in the seeking, right? But again, when you're sitting home doing the same shit, nothing is going to change. But you have to have the courage and the faith and know that you're worth it, that you're worth showing up for yourself, that you're worth going out there and doing something different. And just, it doesn't matter if you're young. Never let anyone tell you that you're too young, or never let anyone tell you that you're too old, because you can literally change your life at any point, at any stage in your life. You can this can be the turning point in your story right here, right now. No matter where you are in your life, you're not fucking stuck. You're not a tree. You're not stuck. But you have to get out there and do it for you, because nobody can fucking make you breathe. Nobody can make you go to the gym. Nobody's going to show up and create the business of your dreams for you. It's up to you. So you got to get off your ass and go after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back on your career, your journey thus far, what do you think has been the secret to the magic that you've attracted and the serendipities that you've experienced in your life?
It's a combination of things. I think it's not one particular thing. I think having resilience and having perseverance and tenacity for myself, knowing that I'm worth more than what I'm currently getting in my life right now. And that in order to find my worth, that I need to do things and show up for myself in a different way. And also, having the courage to find the right mentors and learn from them, and being open to learn from other people, and then knowing when it's time to leave, because some of those mentors, they were doing the best that they could. And, it turned out like they were only able to take me so far, and then it didn't work out after that. Right. So like knowing when to find a new mentor, and then trusting myself, trusting my heart and my intuition, and listening to that quiet little voice inside of me, instead of the loud, noisy voice that wants to do the wrong thing or that doesn't want to do anything at all, but listening to that quiet voice inside of me. That's been my internal guidance.
And one of the best ways to be able to hear that tiny voice is to do breath work.
Yeah.
Where can our audience find you, Jon Paul?
My main website is Breathe with JP, right? BREATHE with JP, not breath with JP. Breathe with JP. And then, I have Zoom classes online on Sundays. I have courses online that you can do in your own time at your own pace. I have teacher trainings in person and online. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work with me. I do classes in Bend, Oregon. I do classes in person in Santa Monica sometimes. So, but don't be afraid to do the online class, because it's really powerful.
Oh, yeah. It is so powerful, and it's inexpensive. It's really affordable. It's $29, I think.
It's $29, but your first time, $10 off. So it's $19. I try to make it accessible for people. And if you can't make the Sunday time at 9 a.m. Pacific time, there's a 72-hour replay afterwards. So, I have people from all over the world who are doing this class, and they're in different time zones. So don't make excuses. And what's powerful about doing the online classes, you're at home, you're in your safe space, so you can really let go and be comfortable of all the stuff that you need to let go of in your safe space. So it's a really incredible, powerful place to do that.
And as you can see, he is one of a kind. Jon Paul, I want to wish you and your family many, many more magical moments to come.
Thanks, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me today. It's been such a joy.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of This Magic Life. Our mission is to inspire you to stop fearing your future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await you. Make sure to subscribe to This Magic Life on YouTube so you don't miss any new episodes. And for on-the-go listening, give us a follow wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We absolutely love to get feedback from the This Magic Life community, so make sure to drop us a comment on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple. And you can always find me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel, aka the Career Magic Maker. I can't wait to see you soon.